back there and kibitz behind me.
I'm gonna get your chair and move you
Get
around.
your attention, yeah.
You better hang on.
First thing we got is everybody had copies of the minutes sent to them. Need a motion to accept them. Ron, second by Greg. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All set, that passed. And now we get into, I guess, presentations. The audit report.
Yes, audit report is first on the agenda. Thomas Smith is here from EFPR, our audit firm. You received these documents, I think, last month or middle of the month. So these are the audit reports that EFPR produces for us. I don't know that you've had a presentation on this in the last few years, so hopefully it will be relatively informative. Who has these with them today? Few of you. All right.
You're not going to take them page by page, are you?
I've got a 2-pager, gonna keep it real short and easy for you.
Yeah, I just handed you Thomas's summary, which he's going to go through. I'm going to try and get it up on the screen, so if you go through the pages, I'll see if I can give you something you can look at.
Any particular place want me?
Right there. If you want to be on the camera, you'll have to turn around. But other than that, you're okay.
You're fine right there.
All right, sounds good. All right, so thank you for having me. First off, I just really want to start with beginning the audit. Usually we're on site in April. We have always worked with Patty O'Brien in the past. This being Eric's first year, it was obviously a very difficult year because we couldn't actually physically be here. COVID shut everything down. So our first go through with Eric as a treasurer, we had to do a remote audit, which is very, very difficult because we do have to request to look at a lot of documentation. So all that information did have to be sent to us. So I really, really want to thank Eric and his staff for being able to provide that to us. That did take a lot of extra time from the county standpoint. So we have issued the financial statements back in July. As I said, I'm not going to go through every page because it's well over 100 pages. We gave a clean, unmodified opinion, meaning that the financial statements are fairly stated. All the information in them, including the numbers, had proper documentation and backup, so that we did get clean opinions on those. Part of our audit, we do look at laws, regulations, as well as the internal controls maintained by the county. We do design certain tests as well as talk to management, as well as different employees in the county. And we did not have anything that needed to be reported to. There weren't any findings, there weren't any weaknesses that you have to be aware of. There are a few financial statement highlights I do want to go through with you real quick. In the general fund, that'd be your main operating fund, your fund balance did decrease by $260,000 from the prior year. As part of that, we do compare your actual revenues and expenses to the budget. Your actual revenue was $1.2 million less than budgeted going into the year. However, on the other side of that, your actual expenses were $2.2 million less than what you budgeted for. So from an actual to budget standpoint, you actually did make some of that back. Some of the other highlights in the other funds, the county road fund did have a small decrease in fund balance from the prior year of 186. But as you can see, right below that, all the other funds listed out how compared to the prior year. And that was the only other fund that had decreased. The road machinery, capital projects fund, solid waste, the health insurance, and the hospital all increased from the prior year. So there was healthy financial gain on those. A few other discussion points. We do look at the debt of the county. That includes the serial bonds, as well as capital leases. So from year over year, you did have an increase of $325,000 in debt. However, that is a net between the payments and new issuances. You paid $345,000 of bonds, as well as paid $327 of capital leases, but you did have just under $1 million of new capital leases between buildings as well as new equipment. The county is subject to what's called a current debt limit. that's the most amount that the county can take out. So if you take your taxable value, this is set in law by New York State, so if your taxable value, 7% of that is the most you can borrow. So the county's is 146 million, and if you flip to page 2, at December 31st, 2019, we had $7.6 million of debt. That's 5.2%. So you're well under that. You're in a healthy position for your debt limit.
Can I comment on that as
Sure.
well? So, what's interesting about this debt limit is that it's based on our taxable value throughout the whole county. It doesn't take into consideration the enterprise fund that we have as the hospital. So it's only assuming that the revenue that we get comes from property taxes. When in reality, if you look at our county as a whole, which includes the hospital, $80 million or more of our revenue annually comes from hospital operations. So even though we're at 5.2%, which is very low, my argument is we're actually even a lot lower because that doesn't include the annual operational revenue that comes from the hospital as well. So if other counties in the state had, a large enterprise fund like that, maybe the state would do things differently. But we're one of only, 2. So our debt limit only is encompassing the property values and not this other huge asset that's bringing revenue for us.
Why are we only one of 2? Why isn't anybody else doing this?
There's only 2 that have county-owned hospitals.
Oh, okay. Perfect. Thank you.
Us in Wyoming County.
Part of our audit too is we issue what's called a management letter. Anything that we see that could be possible recommendations, we like to bring to management's attention. And we did have one comment this year, and that's on cybersecurity. It's something we've noticed at a lot of our other clients. For example, we had a school district last year that had all their information hacked and actually held ransom by a foreign entity. They actually ended up tracing. National security had to get involved, and they traced it in North Korea. Well, they ended up having to actually pay a ransom to get their information back. So this is something that is out there. We want all our clients to actually be aware of it. A lot of people are bringing in third-party vendors to look at their security. So this is something that I just wanted to bring to your attention that is out there and that people do go after municipalities such as yourself.
Was there anything specific about our county that prompted it, or is that just a general warning you're giving?
Just a general warning.
We did do a cybersecurity analysis maybe 2 years ago, but things change so quickly, we're probably due for another one.
Sure. Yeah, and it's absolutely something you just have to stay on top of because that stuff that changes every year. But part of that also is that you also have to make sure you have the right cyber security insurance because that did help cut down. They only had to pay deductible on the ransom. So it's something just to keep in mind. Another piece of our audit is we look at what's called a single audit. The federal awards that you receive, those are subject to compliance, and we have to do a compliance audit. Part of that is we look at HEAP and Medicaid. Most of our testing is on eligibility of individuals. We look at 40 for cases for each of those, and we do not have any compliance findings to report to you. And the last audit that we perform is New York State Department of Transportation. We have to look at compliance with those programs, which include CHIPS, Pave New York, and Extreme Winter Recovery, and the county was in compliance with all those regulations as well. So that is my summary. I'd like to turn over to you for any questions you might have.
I was wondering, real property tax is less than budgeted, $2,683,000. Why would that be? That was the second highlight on
Sure.
the general fund.
That, Eric, are you familiar with what that variance may have been?
Is that where we reimburse towns and they'll have to pay?
Why didn't we get what we budgeted? That's my question.
Well, a lot of it does have to do with your actual collections. So you would have a larger receivable for that amount you will try to collect in future years.
Does that have to do with the pilots?
Which item are you looking at, Phil?
The second, under general fund highlights, the second target there.
Okay, yep. Let me, I can't answer that off the top of my head, but I'll see if I can get you an answer.
Well, it seems kind of staggering, but maybe it's
Typically,
typical, maybe
I don't
it's.
know, I think normally our real property budget is right on, our actuals right on what's budgeted, so let me see what I can find out. And Tom and I
I have something-
I know what,
You
I
opinion?
know one of, part of it was the town, yes, okay. Loudville last year miscalculated their real property tax that they submitted to us for budget. They put the windmills back on the tax rolls when they belong off the tax rolls. So that's part of it, I remember now for sure. But it wasn't 2.6 million, that was only a couple 100,000. But that was, so things like that I'm sure can happen. Things that we've planned on budgeting that get turned on, you know, properties that go onto a pilot or something. But I don't know where 2.6. It's not like we received, you know, our levy was 17 million. It's not like we only received 13.5.
Yes, exactly.
It's not like
No.
that. Right.
No,
I
you
don't know
never
what
collect the
this is
exact budget
measuring.
amount.
We received what we billed to the taxpayer, so I don't know what this is measuring. We never, in all the meetings we've had, we've never talked about this number, so I don't know what it represents.
Let me dig a little bit. I'll do my best to get you an answer, Phil.
The other one, Gatsby 45, where are we setting that?
Sorry, can you say that again?
Gatsby 45?
Oh, yeah, you implemented that 2 years ago.
Right, I mean, is that climbing or holding what we
Go to
originally
page
wrote?
15.
It is pretty
15.
pretty steady. The big thing is Gatsby 45 is actually superseded by Gatsby 75. So 45 made you put it on over 20 years, that long-term health insurance liability. When 75 came in, they didn't try to amortize that over 20 years anymore. So they put the whole liability on. So now it stays a pretty steady number.
Okay, thank you.
So where's the plan? What Jerry's referring to is our other post-employment liability, our net pension liability. So before this new GASB 45, governments didn't have to book the liability, the long-term liability of retirees. So what we have on our liabilities now is the cost of every single retiree's health care until they die is 164 million. Now it's a hypothetical liability, so it's not like we owe 164 million right now. But over the next 50 years, 60 years, as our retirees, you know, get older, we will pay out eventually based on, you know, the demographics of the retirees we have, $164 million. So it's, you know, turns out to be $4 or $5 million a year that we pay, but we have to book the entire liability at once, which is what makes governments, if you scroll down a little bit further, look like we're worth negative $41 million. So that's what we look like on paper, if you guys didn't know. We look like we're worth negative $41 million. But that's because we have to book this hypothetical amount. So the deal with this amount is places like, not to pick on, well, the Chicago education system, for example. They kept taking out bonds and taking on debt that banks and people were investing in without booking the overall liability of their pension system. And when their pension system came due and they couldn't pay for it, all these people that had lent them money were very confused about, you know, what the heck, I thought we were getting an A+ bond. So all governments now have to book this hypothetical liability. And we also have to book our pension liability, which is our share of the state's unfunded pension. So the whole New York State retirement system, obviously they don't fund 100% of it because not everybody's gonna live to 55 or live, you know, to retirement age. So they leave some of it unfunded. This is our portion of the state's unfunded pension. So if the state went bankrupt tomorrow, we'd have to pay out over time for our retirees $12 million. Thomas, is that close,
Yes, that'd be
close to accurate?
Yeah. And the big thing I want to point out with that big 164 health insurance liability number is that you're required to show the entire liability. Whereas you're going to, over time, raise taxes to be able to pay for that, but you're not allowed to show that future earnings piece of it. So you can only show the bad side of it. You can only show the liability, but you can't show any future revenues that you would be getting from
People
it.
that are gonna buy our hospital bond, hopefully in the next year, that are gonna want a piece of that bond, they're gonna wanna look at our finances and know where we're at. And it's only fair that they know what we owe over the next 50 years, you know. So,
And that does include the 164 Thomas just mentioned, correct me if I'm wrong, Thomas, that does include the hospital's piece of that
Correct.
in the business type activities column.
this is the hospital. Well, technically the hospital and solid waste, it's 99%. This is us, this is the hospital and solid waste, this is the hospital.
Yeah, so that number is mostly hospital, but there is a part that goes to the county. That's approximately 60 million. But
Thomas, in your professional opinion, what is the status of the county's finances? Are we healthy? Are we conservative? Are we safe? Are we able to withstand the rainstorm tomorrow?
I believe that you are in a very strong financial position. Really, you really want to look at the fund level statements. That's the general fund. That's where you really budget all your expenditures for. And you do have at 12/31, you had 26% of your 2020 budget in fund balance. So that is your assets minus your liabilities. Really, that you want to at least be at 20%, so you are in a healthy position going into this year, which is good because there are a lot of unexpected items that are happening right now. So the fact that the county has been conservative in prior years has definitely set you up to be ready for this pandemic.
Is there any concern about taking on, this potential additional $33 million bond for the hospital's renovation? Do you see any problem with that?
The only part of the county that we don't audit is actually the hospital. That is audited by someone else, so I can't speak too much to their finances.
But it
And
would be
we
the
haven't looked at.
county's bond.
Sorry?
The county would be taking on
Okay.
that obligation. So under the scenario for us,
Mhm.
is that something that the county can handle?
Oh, it definitely is. Right now, you're only at $7.6 million of bonded debt, and to be honest, that is a low number, especially considering where interest rates are at this time. So this is definitely a time the county should be borrowing.
Ding, 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 ding.
Well, I've only been saying that for 3 years.
Any other questions or comments, or? I guess we're all set. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
So almost as a segue to that, we're going to get the bond counsel on the phone, Charlie Schachter from Harris Beach. And you will receive a copy of the proposed resolution for the bond, serial bonds. So we thought we would get him on the phone and give you an opportunity to have him walk you through what the bond process is, and then answer any questions you have about this particular one.
Hello, Charlie Schechter.
Hi, Charlie. Joe McNichol here.
Hi, John.
Hi. We have you on speaker. We're in the boardroom with all the board members here, actually, and Jerry Carr from the hospital is here, and Ryan, of course, and our treasurer. So we thought maybe you could just walk through the process of bonding for the board members, and then answer any questions they might have in the particular resolution that you prepared.
Okay, be happy to do that. Good afternoon, everyone. So the resolution that we prepared and before you authorizes the issuance of up to $33 million in bonds for the project the county hospital is looking to undertake. So under the process for approval of a bond resolution there has to be a legislative action, a resolution adopted by the county legislature as the governing body of the county. It has to be approved by at least 2/3 of the voting strength or membership of the board. So you have to make sure you have sufficient number of people present to be able to get the 2/3 approval. The resolution, aside from authorizing the issuance of the bond, also formally authorizes the undertaking of the project that's going to be financed with the bonds, if that has not been already authorized by the legislature. It also sets forth the expected plan of finance for the project, which can change over time. But currently, the plan of finance is stated as the issuance of up to $33 million in bonds, and then and to the extent necessary to pay the debt service on the bonds, the levying of and collection of taxes to pay principal and interest as it comes due. Now, that does not prevent the county or the hospital from seeking other funds so that it doesn't have to borrow the full amount. If he's able to secure either grants from Department of Health or any other federal or state agency or any other source, that's perfectly fine, and then the county can issue a lesser amount of bonds. So what the bond resolution does is authorizes a maximum amount. You cannot go over that. And it also sets forth the maximum cost of the project. So that if the project cost did go up, then the hospital will have to come back to the legislature to approve an increase in the maximum cost, and if necessary, the additional bond authorization. The resolution also sets forth, it determines what's called the period of probable usefulness, which represents the maximum term for which the bonds can be issued for. And for this type of project, the PPU, as we call it, period of probable usefulness, is 25 years. That's based upon this being a renovation and addition to an existing building, and it's considered a Class A building, meaning it's fireproof, and therefore, under the local finance laws, provides a 25-year term, which is pretty long for a bond issue. The resolution also delegates authority to the chief fiscal officer of the county, which is the county treasurer, to basically, once the resolution is adopted, to proceed and take such actions as are necessary to proceed with the financing. So that if at a later date the county is determined that the county wants to proceed with the issuance of a bond anticipation note, which are also authorized under the resolution, there's no need to go back to the legislature to approve that or authorize that. That delegation of authority is sufficient to invest the treasurer with the authority to make that determination. Similarly, if the county does initially issue bond anticipation notes, and they're typically issued for a year, usually they don't go beyond a year, then if at the end of the year you then want to convert to permanent financing again, you do not have to go back to the legislature to authorize that. It's already included within the bond resolution. The resolution also delegates authority to the treasurer to take such actions as are necessary to make sure the bonds are going to be qualified to be issued on a tax-exempt basis so that the county can benefit from the lowest interest rate possible. And also to take whatever, such actions as to comply with federal securities law with respect to continuing disclosure to the extent those rules apply. So again, the intent of the resolution is to provide sufficient authority with the chief fiscal officer to do what's necessary to undertake the financing. Under state law, in order to be able to adopt a bond resolution, the county first has had to complete the environmental review process under the State Environmental Quality Review Act. I understand that has been done, and actually it's referenced in the whereas paragraph of the resolution. So that's a sort of a precondition to being able to adopt the resolution, and that's been satisfied. Once the resolution is adopted and it will become effective upon adoption, it's necessary at that point to publish what's called an estoppel notice in the newspaper. It's a legal notice, and we prepared that as part of the resolution. It's the last page of the document, the last 2 pages. And it basically, it has to be published in the official newspaper of the county for legal publication purposes. And then once it's published, basically wait 20 days. And if someone would have to basically start an Article 78 proceeding, so a legal action alleging that the county legislature did not have the legal authority to adopt that resolution. So the bar is pretty high. And so, absent a state constitutional defect, then if they don't submit that claim within 20 days, they're estopped, so to speak. That's why it's called an estoppel notice from doing so. I guess the effect of the notice is to accelerate the statute of limitations on the ability to challenge the validity of a bond resolution from what it would otherwise be for 20 days. 20 days from publication. And it's just a way of now being able to market the bonds without fear of there may be a challenge. Even though that occurs extremely rarely in the first place. So once it's been published and we get an affidavit of publication and we wait 20 days, then the county's good to go, and it can, when it's ready, it can proceed with a financing. That's really it as far as the authorization of the bond. The next step would be to proceed towards the financing, which the county has done in the past, and you would have to retain its municipal financial advisor to help market the bonds, because that will, these bonds will be of a size more than $1 million that there's going to need to be an official statement produced, and the bonds have to be sold on a competitive bid basis. So there's a whole competitive bid process that's required under the local finance law, which the county's financial advisor, fiscal advisor, would undertake. And then once that's done, and then the bonds are sold, then we proceed towards the closing, and our firm would draw up all of the legal documents for the closing, the certificates, the legal opinions, and we would send them to the county to be signed, and we would provide our proven bond counsel opinion, and then the bond's closed, or the band will issue notes first on the anticipation of stay closed. So For a county, the process is not as, it's fairly straightforward. Unlike villages or towns, where their bond resolutions could be subject to what's called a permissive referendum. That doesn't apply as a general rule to counties, and doesn't apply to this bond resolution. So, John, that's really it. There's not much more to it.
Yeah, I did have one question. I'm going to jump in. Is there any limitation of time as to when the county would have to go out and start the bonding process? Even if they pass it at this September meeting, because as you know, the project is not confirmed that it's actually going forward, based upon the critical access decision, right, Jerry? So does the county have to go out and actually start the bonding process within a set period of time after the resolution is passed?
Yes, but it's 10 years. A bond resolution by its terms, of course, under the local finance law, bond resolution lapses after 10 years. So obviously that's a long period of time. So how that could come up would be, most likely scenario to come up is that a bond resolution is adopted for a particular amount of money, and a municipality may borrow a part of that on a partial basis initially. And then, we have municipalities that might do road reconstruction or sewer lines or stuff like that, and they do it piecemeal. They adopt the bond resolution for a big project, but they actually borrow piecemeal over a number of years. And so it's possible that you get to year 10 and they haven't borrowed all the money yet. And so they have to make sure that they do that, within 10 years, or else the general rule of lapses, which means that the municipality would have to adopt a new bond resolution at that time.
Anybody else have questions? Jerry?
No, I would just add the next big step will be the submission of the CON. And so that will add some time to this process.
And having this resolution in place helps with the CON, right?
That is correct. And we're projecting that to be at the end of the first week or the beginning of the second week in September.
Oh, okay. So the one thing I will add, the fact that you don't have CON approval certainly doesn't affect the validity of the bond resolution, but I don't think you'd want to go out with a borrowing prior to the time you have CON approval.
Right.
Because then you don't have the approval to basically undertake the project for which you're financing.
That's why I asked. Yeah, that's why I asked about that time limitation. But I think we're okay with 10 years.
So I'm unclear on, so if we pass this resolution in September and we don't actually start borrowing money on a bond anticipation note until January, do we have to redo this bond resolution?
No.
No. So even though, and I presume you say January because it's a new legislative term?
Correct.
Yeah. No, a bond resolution is binding upon future legislatures. So it remains in effect, as I say, for up to 10 years. And there's no need to go back to the board, future legislatures, to re-adopt it or ratify it. And that's the intent, quite frankly. And that's why there's also a delegation of authority in the resolution to the county treasurer, so they can do what needs to be done to proceed for financing without having to go back to the legislature. It's both it would be cumbersome to have to do that each time, because, when you go to the point where you want to borrow, you may need the money quickly, or there, you have deadlines, and to have to go back each time to the legislature would be a cumbersome process, especially when the competitive bid process, the chief fiscal officer has to have the ability, the authority, not only bid out the bond, but to award the bid and to determine the sale. And you can't hold things up to be able to have to go back to the legislature to approve that. So that's the whole point of the delegation of authority. And then also, I think, as I mentioned, the whole point of a bond resolution is to be binding for that period of time, so that it doesn't have to be reapproved each year by at the next legislative session.
Thank you.
Sure.
Anything else?
I guess that takes care of it. We thank you.
All right, Charlie, we'll be in touch, and thanks for your help on this.
Okay.
Okay. Bye.
Okay, thank you. Take care.
Did we get 15 minutes of build time?
Jerry's paying.
More like half an hour because you're 13 minutes.
Yeah, the truck.
You're next.
That's right, I am.
Time's up.
Solar. Can you come on up too, Cassie? Yeah. I think it's the second.
Middle one.
So, we want to talk about solar policy, and we took a run at this maybe in March, right when the world seemed to be crashing down, and I was in my office listening to new announcements from the governor, and we didn't do a good job framing this issue and explaining what's going on with solar and what we're proposing. So we're back here in August, and we want to talk about it again. So why are we talking about solar? There are currently over 2,800 acres of proposed solar development in Lewis County. Some of these projects alone are over 1,000 acres. Okay, so we actually are referring to it as the solar tsunami, because our local IDA and planning departments and towns are literally being inundated with requests for solar development. And you have to look at the New York State landscape. So the governor and the legislature have set this goal that New York State's going to be 50% energy independent by 2030. In order to make it to that goal, they need to highly incentivize and push the development of clean energy projects. We know this, we've talked about it, right? Well, we also have the largest city in the United States, and they're not going to be putting large-scale solar and wind projects there. They're not going to be putting them in Westchester. They're not going to be putting them in Nassau County. They are going to be coming to places like Lewis County, and they're going to be pushing hard because of the amount of money that's on the line for them and incentives for these developers. So we feel, the planning department, myself, that we need to have a strategy in place for how we control this development in a smart way. We can be pro-solar while also being pro-smart solar. We don't need to just take whatever the developers are going to give us. We can set some terms and conditions so that we're protecting the future of our community in the long run. And that's what we're talking about today. And also, ag land has a high economic value, so we'll get into that as well. So it's not just necessarily a slam dunk that we're taking ag land and putting solar on. There's intrinsic value in productive agricultural land that has spin-off value in our community. So, kind of a visualization of what we've been talking about. These are two beautiful pictures of Lewis County that I took off the Naturally Lewis website. I think that if we do nothing, if we sit back on our haunches and kind of let development terms get dictated to us, I think we might go from this to this. And what we'd really like to see, I think what we'd all like to see, is something more like this, which is balanced solar with ag together, complementing the landscape. We can grow, but we can grow in a smart way. Good so far, Cass? All right, so the other reason we want to talk about this is because we should be thinking about long-term land value. So a 1 acre of agricultural land that supports a dairy farm adds $6,800, almost $6,700 of residual economic value into our community. Because there's tractors, there's shovels, there's fertilizer, there's crop management. There's all the things that go into that acre of land that the velocity of the money circulates through our whole community. With solar, it has value too, but the total value of 1 acre of solar is $1,492. This was a study done by the Tug Hill Commission. So this isn't just Lewis County that's thinking about this. This is the Tug Hill Commission is thinking about this, the Development Authority of the North Country is thinking about this, but we are hoping to be one of the first counties to start really trying to put some of this stuff into place. So how can we smartly embrace solar? The first thing, which is what we have in front of you guys today, is to encourage towns to adopt solar land use policies. So we included in your packet a land use policy that, yes, we're calling it the New Bremen policy, but it could be the Cassie Buell policy because she's done a lot of work on this. But basically, we're going to go through some of the specifics of that policy and why it's important. The second thing that we can do is we can use the county planning board to encourage smart growth policies. So instead of thinking about solar as a one-off, well, that's Krogan's problem, that's New Bremen's problem, that's Leiden's problem, they can control their own development. We do feel that it is a county-wide concern, a community-wide concern, that our Ag Protection Board and our County Planning Board should be involved in reviewing those types of projects to make sure that they're done in a smart way. And then the third thing, which hopefully the IDA will come next month, is we can use tax policy to help encourage the right type of development in our community. And you'll learn more about that next month. So, the New Bremen Solar Law was originally developed by the Tug Hill Commission and DANK, but really it's our local folks have got their fingerprints all over it. Here are the key elements. Actually, I'll let Cassie go through this because she knows it a lot better than I do. So.
Okay. So if any of you know any of our municipalities that have solar policies in their zoning, there's 6, and New Bremen will be the 7th that have some sort of solar policy in their zoning regulations. So out of 17 towns, 6 have solar regulations, which is very scary because solar is almost as complicated as wind in some senses. It takes up more of a footprint of our landscape, so we have more to lose. If some of you were sitting in on our General Services Committee meeting, there was concern about, oh my gosh, 3,000 acres could be set aside for 40 years. Well, we can't develop that. This is the same thing. We can't develop that for 30 to 40 years because of those footprints that these solar panels are going to be taking up. So it's extremely important for the planning department to be involved on a county planning board function because we review these solar developments all the time. But typically we review them based upon their countywide impact or upon the local zoning. So say that the town of Leiden doesn't have zoning that pertains to solar. Well, how far can we really go to say that that developer has to uphold certain zoning regulations when they don't have it? So some of these key elements are what we were proposing is just a guidance to these municipalities to hopefully endorse them to adopt this simple template And we've created it so that they can literally just plug in their towns. But if they go through it and assess it, element by element, they can really customize it towards their needs. Say they want more of a bond agreement, or they want more stipulations, they can add them. But it really touches base on every single component that we can come up with, that Dane has come up with, that the regional entities have put their heads together with to cover this really comprehensively for the municipalities, so they don't have to work as hard to figure out, well, what should we be looking at 10 years into our future. So some of the key elements that are included in this municipal template, we're calling it, is prime ag land. I think in March we had maybe suggested to maybe limit it to 50% prime ag land, and then the rest should be marginal ag land. Well, we're trying, we don't want to over-regulate solar. We want solar development. We just want we want to work together with it. We don't want to take away our ag industry to accommodate solar. But we also don't want to tell a farmer that they can't, add a certain amount of lease agreement onto their revenue streams every year because we're over-regulating how much they can use the prime farmland for. So in this municipal template, it's basically to the maximum extent possible. So the developers are responsible for showing that they've tried. They've tried to utilize the marginal ag land first, and then they've had to spill over into that prime ag land. Screening. Who wants to drive down one of our roads? Yes, Greg.
You're saying to the maximum extent of practice.
Yes.
Practice.
Yes.
So what if it did take more than 50% of their quote prime farmland?
They're going to have to prove that there's a reason why they couldn't go onto that marginal ag land. So because
we're regulating it.
No, we're offering, this is going to be in the local zoning, the municipal zoning. They're going to say, listen, we want to endorse the use of our marginal ag land. If you have to put it on prime ag land, we really just want you to explain to us why you couldn't put it on the marginal ag land that's on that same property.
Okay, who designates the prime ag land?
That's all GIS mapped. Yep, it's all.
So you're basically telling the farmer what he can and can't do with his land?
Nope, not at all. Because they can develop on prime ag land. We're just really pushing them to look at that marginal ag land first. As long as they can prove that they looked at that first and there was no way that they could either.
See, I take issue to this, to telling a farmer what he can and can't do with his land. It really brings up, because right now they're losing money every day.
Right.
Every day they're losing money. They're dumping 25,000, 30,000 pounds of milk a day. They aren't getting paid worth of squat, $12, $13. That's what they're getting paid back in the 80s, or 70s even. So we're telling them that we don't want you to use that land. We want that kept so we can plant crops to feed what? Sooner or later, there are not going to be any cows left. They keep going out left and right. I mean, that's just the.
We're not putting a percentage on that, though. We're not putting that percentage on that. We're just basically saying, hey, please look at using the marginal ag land first. And if you can't use the marginal ag land, we're not telling you can't use the prime ag land. We're just telling you that you need to show us how and why you can't use that marginal ag land.
We've discussed this a little bit with the Ag Sustainability Committee, which has some farmers represented on that. Actually, what we've heard from some of the farmers is they feel that some of these farms that are welcoming solar are getting bullied a little bit by the developers because their highest yielding land is also right onto the road and right onto the electrical grid. So the developers are kind of pushing it down their throat when really, if we could support them a little bit by saying, obviously these guys aren't looking to cash in and close their farm completely. So if they could just have an incentive to use the not best, highest yielding land, they can still have their solar, but they can also still have some of their best ag land as well.
There's other ways of going about that. If you want to keep them in ag, you can go into the land trust end of it. So it's forever ag.
Right.
Without, and they get paid
well, what would
that also.
This was actually coordinated. I worked with developers on what would be a deal breaker for them. And this verbiage was the absolute best we could come up with. It would not be a deal breaker for them to solicit a farmer's farmland if we kept it like this. If we put a percentage on it, then they would be privy to walk away. So that's why we worked in this. It was the best meeting of both minds for them, and they were actually very acceptable to that. So that's how we came up with that language, actually, with the developers, because we didn't want to push it away. We didn't want to over-regulate it where it would scare away developers. We wanted to work with them, but we also wanted to show that ag land is important to our county.
So basically, this is a recommendation,
Yes.
not a requirement.
Right.
So maximum extent prep.
Yes.
Jerry, sorry.
Yeah, Cass and I have been going back and forth, and Ryan and I have too. And one of the things is that the developers come in and take the easiest pass they can, which is the most, how you say it, they're saving money on a construction project, it goes in their pocket, no one else's. And if you get looking at the land that's not prime, and we can get them to use that, it's kind of a win for the farmers too, if that's what they want to do. Because the thing is, the non-prime land, what do they do with it? They're not growing crops on it and this and that. So essentially, if we can get everybody looking at that direction, what I see happening, it's a gift that potentially you keep on giving, because when you take your cropland and put solar on it, that's done. But if you put it on your crap land that you can't do anything with anyways, you still have the potential of leasing that land if you're not farming to another farmer.
Yeah, and you're not gonna get crap for it either.
Well, but it's,
You're not gonna get, Jerry, you're not gonna get, because I mean, I know the pricing of this stuff, you're not gonna get what these solar guys are paying.
yeah,
You know,
but the
per
thing
acre.
is, and I'm not saying, I mean, I see the point of not breaking the deal. So if that's what they gotta use, that's what they gotta use. But on the same aspect, potentially making them use your crap land first, you could parlay into a little extra income, even if it's crap. At $35 an acre, $5 an acre.
Absolutely, but that's,
I think the other issue here is that I'm with you, Greg. I think that our dairy farm industry right now has had a really, really rough few years.
it's crapper.
I know. But we're talking about the fundamental character of our community based on a temporary market condition. So we know where things are right
Temporary
now.
market condition,
Well, it's been
5 years, that's, I don't consider that temporary.
But this changes Lewis County permanently, or at least for the next 35 years.
40 years.
Right.
So,
Why are they saying 40 now instead of 25?
It all depends on the useful life, and they keep extending it, because there's
They can renew it too.
Yes, they can renew
Okay.
pilots and extend them, yes. So in addition to prime ag land, we included components with screening. Who wants to be driving down one of our rural roads and it's just, you're going through aisles and aisles and aisles of these solar arrays? So there's just smart screening that you include to buffer those areas from the view sheds, especially with our Black River view shed, all of our natural resources. That's how our tourism is based off of. Who wants to come up here and just see a field full of solar panels? We just want to do it so that it's screening from the visual impacts. Decommissioning, that's one of the biggest components. You have to have one of those decommissioning plans in place before even these small 2 megawatt projects go up, because you want to know that that farmland is going to be put back to its original state. And the good thing is a lot of the current solar projects are pile driven rather than cement foundations, so a lot of them are easily removed. So it also requires the neighbors to be notified of the project, stormwater, PPE plans, property maintenance plans, anti-glare, that was really big for Fort Drum to have in there, and we also put in there to just notify Fort Drum of the project so that they can take a look at it. It doesn't say that Fort Drum has to okay it before it goes forward. It just says you have to send a notification to Fort Drum that it is a foreseeable project. Fencing, obviously you want that security of the fencing. We have children, we have animals, and that fencing needs to be accessible by our EMS, by our fire coordinators. That's also in there, that our fire departments need to be notified so that they know who to contact and how to shut this stuff off if there were to be a an emergency. And then a noise analysis. So many people don't look at the inverters and think that they would put out a lot of noise, but they do. So the location of those is really important in a lot of these instances, especially if they're near residential sidewalks.
So we talked a lot about the ag aspect, and that is important, but just these other things alone is just smart policy. If we're gonna have industrial scale development on the level that we haven't had in Lewis County in 100 years coming into our community, I think it's smart to have our town start thinking about this stuff, especially decommissioning. I mean, that's a scary thought of, you know, what happens 50 years from now when every field's covered in rust, you know? So I think that alone is something to consider. And just to be clear, we're not adopting this as a county policy. We're doing a resolution that encourages the rest of the towns in the county to adopt their own zoning law with this as a template. So we really can't determine land use on a specific level in any of our towns. So we need them to take the initiative, and hopefully as the county government, we can be the thought leaders in some of this stuff to point them in the right direction to protect the community at large. So, questions and discussion. That's all we're talking about today, is just encouraging towns to adopt the new Bremen law, which was in your packet.
And to give the county planning
Oh,
board premise to utilize or to look at solar development or utility scale solar development as having a countywide impact, so that we can look at the view sheds and we can look at the ag district land that's being taken up. And it's simply to give our advice on how they should proceed with those projects.
How many of the towns have reached out to you?
Krogan has. They've looked for the draft New Bremen law. There are 6 that currently have some sort of solar in place. It definitely could be more robust, but over the past couple years, I think that a lot of them are just trying to get their head above water with a lot of these projects. But the town of Krogan is extremely interested because they also have an Article 10 going in their area. So they just want to make sure they're ahead of that 8 ball too. But I can foresee other municipalities hopefully updating their entire zoning and comprehensive planning to accommodate a lot of this solar. That's another one of my projects. But yes, there has been a lot of interest in solar because they just don't know what they don't know. It's not their fault. It's definitely a learning curve for everybody.
What kind of acreage is involved, like as a minimum?
It depends. So like a 2 megawatt could be 5 to 10 acres. But the Article 10 projects that are going in the town of New Bremen and the town of Krogan, the town of New Bremen is over 1,000 acres. The town of Krogan is over 1,500 acres. That's a huge amount of farmland in a small area. So these laws, New York State with their new 94C is going to be replacing the Article 10. New York State, the siting board will look at the local laws to, rip through, okay, this screening is obviously significant to them. How have you addressed screening? They'll take care of that. It won't be handled at a local level for the town of New Bremen and the town of Krogan. But it's important to have these laws so that the siting board knows what's important to these local municipalities. So it doesn't matter how big the project is, but this law is particular to anything really utility scale solar. So 2 megawatt up. It's not residential solar. It's not ag solar. It's not like business solar if you put solar panels on top of your roof. That's all. A lot of municipalities have that in their local regulations already. But this is not that they have to go through a whole site plan review to add solar to their residence.
Yes, that Krogan one, that also encompasses another county?
Yes,
and
will
obviously
not.
another
A
township.
sliver of it, but yes.
So
Yep.
how is that going to
Affect.
that?
Well, they have to apply. They have to go by both regulations. The siting board, they're going to have two siting representations from both siting boards, and
So there's nothing that parallels this on the other
no,
side
no,
of the
it'll be the
county?
same process. It's just
I
between
know
two
Wilna
different
does
counties.
have its own solar law, so I mean a lot of the stuff that they've adopted is similar to what Krogan, if they adopt this, would be.
Mhm.
One thing to build off of that though, and this is something that's come up with these projects, is under Article 23, which is replacing Article 10, The threshold for a large solar project has gone from 25 megawatts down to 10 megawatts, so anything over 10 megawatts is considered a large project. If it's a large project, they can move to opt out of the local laws. So the way that these laws sometimes function at the town level, and this is just something for the towns to be aware of, the restrictions will apply to those under 10 megawatts. So like the one family farm, that wants a solar development, that's like under 10 megawatts, so the 5 to 7 range, like you were saying. The larger projects will actually have a mechanism for opting out of local zoning. It doesn't mean they will, but it's available to them. And with our Article 23, actually, the towns have less say in how the projects are created than they did under Article 10.
So we've been thinking a lot about that. The state is taking even more control over green energy development, probably to ensure that they meet their goals. Because Article 10 has taken 5 years to do one wind project. The rebuttal to that is the state still does not control pilots and tax rates. And so you'll hear from Brittany next month about, we've been calling this the two-pronged approach. One side is land use, the other side is taxing. And we can use our tax policy as, this is the carrot, then maybe that's the stick to encourage the right type of development in our community. So we're thinking about, what if the state comes in and just starts, saying you're going to do, you're going to have them here. Well, we can control what they pay in taxes.
Just along what Ian was talking about, the IDAs and Ryan also, the IDAs in the process of formalizing their UTEP, which is a Uniform Tax Exemption Policy for solar. And in order to encourage developers to use non-prime land, they're going to stage the pilot so that, let's say, if they use poor quality land, they'll pay within a range of $3,000 to $3,500 a year in a pilot payment. If they utilize prime farmland, they're going to be paying $500 to $5,500 a range. So that sort of incentivizes them to use the non-prime land in case they want to exempt out of the land use plan that we're talking here.
So a lot of the argument is, well, we need to be on this prime land because it's right next to the road and that's where the hookup is. Well, okay, we're giving you a break on taxes, go in the back and run a longer hookup. That's kind of the thought process.
Yeah, but one question is when we put these windmills in, they don't have the transmission lines enough to carry it out of here. So they're gonna put all this stuff in there, how are they gonna get it in? Put it in 5-gallon buckets and mail it?
I think you're going to see the state invest more in the grid. They have to.
Well, yeah.
We're actually working with Cornell on the Bond Act on submitting a concept for extended one-phase power lines to 3-phase power lines to be able to access those marginal properties a lot easier and to take that energy out. We're working on it.
I mean, if they don't do something to get it there, even though these things are producing, it's just gonna sit there. I mean, they shut the windmills down now because it's stranded cost you have to pay, and they can continue producing, but they can't, they're overloaded.
The state is in the process of upgrading this Hasley line, Power Authority State of New York, runs from Messina to Croton. So they're in the process of upgrading that. National Grid owns from Krogan to Marcy. So my thought is you're going to see the state heavily invest to get National Grid to upgrade that line to continue all the way to Marcy.
Yeah,
So they are thinking about what you're talking about.
But have they done it? Yeah, but they get it to there. Have they done anything from Marcy to New York City?
It's not my fault.
That's one of the big problems there.
Yeah. The state has a lot of challenges, but they've seemingly been willing to put their money where their mouth is when it comes to green energy. So I would imagine we'll see some investments.
Hopefully.
Well, that's what I think. I mean, to me, I think you can have both. I mean, this vision I think is great, just like the windmills. I mean, we've called it Lewis County's third crop or fourth crop because some of these windmills were really lifesavers for some of these farms. And I think solar can be the same, but we have to balance it, you know, between the two. Because if we go all in, you know, on solar and we lose the agriculture, you're losing all those businesses that go with it. And once you lose the infrastructure, it's hard to get that back. So I think if we take a balanced, thoughtful approach, we can get better outcomes.
But without a little regulation, can you imagine what it would look like here? Just for some
Right.
panels.
You'll lose some of the beauty that people come up here to enjoy.
I think it looked like that. I think we can do this. I think this makes sense.
Okay. Anything else? Thank you very much. Go with the docket.
Okay, the first one is introductory law number 7-2020, a local law to authorize overriding a tax levy limit established by General Municipal Law 3C, aka 2% tax cap for the Lewis County 2021 budget, and fixing the date of the public hearing for October 6, 2020.
Any questions or comments?
You know what the percentage is gonna be this time around?
Yep, close to 2%. I think it's pretty high because if you take, even though things have dumped off the last 5 months, the previous 18 months, the inflation has been high, so I think it was,
1.87.
yeah, I was just gonna say 1.87. I think it's pretty, it's the highest, one of the highest we've ever had, for what we can take.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carried.
Resolution adopting the retention and disposition schedule for New York local government records issued pursuant to Article 57A of the Arts and Cultural Affairs Law.
Any questions or comments? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carried.
Resolution to transfer $3,000 from capital data processing to the county clerk accounts for the purchase of various computer equipment.
Questions or comments? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Resolution to approve bonding up to the amount of $33 million for Lewis County General Hospital addition/renovation project.
Questions, comments, thoughts? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Resolution authorizing an agreement between the County of Lewis by and through the Lewis County Human Resources Department and Mountain View Prevention Services for the purpose of Employee Assistance Program services for the term of September 1st, 2020 through August 31st, 2021 at an annual cost of $5,670.
This is something we always do.
So we always have an EAP, but we're changing our services from Pivot to Mountain View Prevention. It's a lesser cost.
Anything else? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Resolution authorizing an update of the agreement with Verizon Wireless for the county's cell phones and other wireless devices to the newly upgraded New York State contract pricing plan.
Which is what?
It's actually, I guess Verizon negotiated something with the state contracts that will benefit us. It'll save us about $3,000 in the cost of the cell phones and give us more extended minutes, especially when we went into COVID under the old plan we had. A number of departments used more than what their allotted minutes were, so now they'll be unlimited for most departments, and it's going to save us $3,000. It's a good thing.
Yeah. Sounds good.
Anything else? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Resolution in support of and recommendation for the municipal solar development law template developed by DANK and further customized for adoption by all other municipalities in Lewis County and for the Lewis County Planning Board to consider potential countywide impacts of utility-scale solar energy projects.
Any questions or comments? That's what we basically just went over, right? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
I'll abstain due to conflict.
Okay. Carried.
Resolution to set the computation for the 2021 workers' compensation participant assessments for the Lewis County self-insurance plan.
Questions or comments? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
The next couple are ones that came forward from previous committees. Resolution to amend the compensation plan with reference to the Sheriff's Department to abolish a permanent full-time jail nurse at a salary grade 34 and create a permanent full-time jail nurse at a salary grade 35, and to authorize a MOA between the county and CSEA with respect to the grade change in compensation.
Any questions or comments? All in favor, aye. Opposed? Carried.
Resolution to amend the compensation plan with reference to the Public Health Department to abolish a permanent part-time administrative assistant at a salary grade 15 and create a permanent full-time administrative assistant at a salary grade 15.
Questions or comments on that one? All in favor, aye. Opposed? Carried.
Resolution to amend the compensation plan with reference to the Public Health Department to create a permanent full-time public health nurse at a salary grade 35.
Questions or comments? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Resolution to amend the compensation plan with reference to Lewis County General Hospital to abolish one full-time health management transcriptionist and one part-time health information management clerk, and to create one part-time patient access clerk, one full-time patient account clerk, one full-time health information coder, and one full-time health information clerk.
Questions, comments? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Resolution to transfer funds in the amount of $28,248 from legislative contingency to real property accounts for expense of new countywide tax collection system approved in Resolution 265-2019.
So our bill has finally come due for our system to put in the partial payments that we had to go throughout, not partial payments. You think I would have learned installment payments throughout the towns, and the towns that adopted this, we helped them with their software costs, and the bill has come due, so time to pay.
And we didn't know what it was gonna be at the time.
I think we did. I think we didn't put it in the budget under Candy's department like we should have, but it's here now. So.
We did know.
There was discussion about the county paying, it's a one-time payment that the county would
That
pay
was-
for, so I don't think we thought about Candy's budget at the
But we
time.
didn't know how many towns were going to take us up
Yeah.
on it, so that was a variable. But
Well, it was an effort to incentivize towns. to
Right.
buy in.
Well, they're still paying another part,
Yeah.
maintenance or something split between all the towns involved.
we're paying. This was their one-time.
Yeah, we paid the
startup.
first one, first or
3,500
second year or
something.
something, and then
Yeah.
they're on their own for the updates.
But it was a split, they split the maintenance costs at that point.
Yeah.
Anything else? All in favor, aye. Opposed? Carried.
And then we have the two motions brought forward. So a motion to authorize Highway Superintendent Warren Shaw to refill the mechanic welder position effective immediately due to resignation.
We have a motion.
I'll move it.
Ron, second. Ian,
Sounds like
all in favor, say aye.
Okay, and then the second one is a motion to authorize solid waste director Kip Turk to refill a MEO position and all associated backfills effective immediately due to resignation.
Motion? Yep. Greg, second by Bill. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Sound like Rodman.
That's all I had.
We want to get a motion to go into executive session, or we want a 5-minute break before we go into executive session?
Get her done. That's just me.
Second.
You went on break, you went late.
This is for labor negotiations and for personnel.
I'll make the motion officially.
All right.